So, in the lead up to the Rainbow Six Invitational, or SI20 as it's more commonly known, I want to go over my thoughts on the various groups and how I think things will play out. Now, as this current video is probably going to be released at least a month before the event, clearly there is a lot of room for things to change. However, overall, I think the analysis and what I'm saying is going to be relatively on point and stay true up till the event. So being said, let's take a look at Group D, which in my opinion is probably the weakest team in the sense that none of the teams really stand out as a dominant squad that is likely to go on to win the tournament or make a deep run after getting out of this group. So with that said, let's go into the different teams, how I think they're doing, their current state, why they're in their current state, and how that'll turn out in the actual tournament. So starting from the top, we have Team Reciprocity, the North American team. They are known for their aggressive play. That's one of their calling cards. Their team is composed of Laxing, Foxay, Retro, Nyx, and Vertical. All of those players are well known for their fragging ability and being able to pop off. Now, this squad made two big roster changes within the past month or so. They dropped Skies and Mark the Shark being an IGL, and picked up Vertical and Nyx. Nyx from Dark Zero, Vertical from the Rogue roster from North America. And so, how do I think this team is going to do? Well, based off what they're showing in Pro League and what we saw in USN, which should not be taken too seriously as a measure of success or quality of a team. Teams are still playing to win. It's more for the glory of it. A lot of pocket strats aren't going to be shown at this event when it's all NA, and the stakes and the reward are relatively low. I don't even think the teams get an invite slot or anything. It's not a very important event, so Reciprocity's placing at that event should not be a measure of like their true potential or the teams that they beat's their true potential. That being said, I think Rec is probably one of the top teams in this group, even though they're going to have some growing pains, and they have had some growing pains dealing with a new IGL, dealing with Nick seeming to be a little up and down, and his role on the team as being like an entry fragger. It's still hard to tell if Ashe bans really hinder him on attack. And that will be very impactful because if it's proven that he just really has issues on other ops outside of Ashe, that's a very clear ban to put Reciprocity in a weak position. And now there was the most recent Pro League game where he was put on Zofia for 2 rounds. However, that was a 7-2 drubbing against Evil Geniuses, and Rex started on defense. So Nyx only had to be semi-competent for 2 rounds to close out the game. That's not to say he was playing bad, but 2 rounds is not enough of a data set to make any decisive observations on whether or not an Ashe ban really affects his gameplay. Now, overall, I think the squad is good. There's a lot of big names here that can frag. However, there's also very big weaknesses. Like if Vertical or Laxing or Nyx especially has an off day, this team will struggle and drag down. So if they're on point, they have the highest skill ceiling out of this entire group. Just if you add up all the players in their skill ceilings and just have that as a metric, Reciprocity has the biggest skill ceiling of this group, with BDS being probably a close second, but that's mostly just because of Shaiko. That's not because of his entire team being full of gunners, that's because of Shaiko and Renshiro. So I think Reciprocity will most likely be going through this group onto the stage. However, because of how off and on they are, there's also a very good chance that they may fall flat on their face or get put in a situation where they get counter-stratted in a deciding match, which prevents them from going on to the stage matches. I think those are less likely, but they are still possibilities that should be put out there. Now, just going down the list because I'm looking at the graphic of the official graphic for the group pool draw results on the R6 Esports Twitter. Wildcard Gaming. I think this team in Tokoname, the Season 10 Pro League Finals, had a lot of upset potential. I think there's some names in there that can surprise people, and if they're not properly prepared for, Wildcard can be a very strong team. I think overall they are a pretty competent team. It's, in my opinion, that they are a team that will definitely upset other squads and has the X factor to really make it happen. In Tokoname, they were one round off of beating Navi and going to the semifinals. Was it semifinals or grand finals? Either way, Wildcard was in a very strong position to potentially have beaten the eventual winners of Tokoname, and that can't be understated. They even looked dominant during that match on the map that they won, and then it was a close map 3. So Wildcard clearly has some strengths that can't be ignored. Having not followed the APAC region nearly enough to make a definitive statement on them, however, I can't say one way or the other that they are a weak team or a strong team. I think if they get figured out, if they have like this gimmick, if they've tried to find some gimmick recently, it will most likely be found out during this time and it will prevent them from going on. However, unless something exceptional happens, I see them being the most likely to go out of this group with the most consistency behind reciprocity. With that said, let's talk about BDS. Now, if you asked me how I think BDS would do a month ago, even, I would have said that they had a pretty good chance to make it at least onto the stage, into the quarterfinals, possibly even the semifinals. However, after roster changes that they've made, i.e., dropping Panics, another IGL, for Alems, they've looked very shaky and not the same squad that tore through EU Challenger League and was making waves during minors. As a result, I don't see them as the most dominant team in this group. If they had Panics and were still showing that strong form that they had previously, they would have been my top pick for this group of like going on and making a pretty decent run. As they are now, if Shaiko and Renshiro don't have great games, even if they do, the other players often aren't doing enough to really support those two primary fraggers in ways that enable them to win. When I think of the first Pro League match, which shouldn't be taken as absolute law, Shaiko and Renshiro were dropping double digits. Raphael had 2 kills for most of the match. And then Alems and RX were pulling some weight, but just not enough to shore up for players underperforming. I think this team, if everyone does their job and pulls their own weight, they will have moderate success. However, if one player has the land shakes or underperforms in any sense of the word, this team will be very likely to drop because Shaiko and Renshiro won't be able to really pull enough weight and carry. So I see BDS being a team that has upset potential, and yes, I'm treating them as an underdog in comparison to Rec and Wildcard, because their fundamentals look the worst when compared to Wildcard and Rec. And Rec looks shaky, but their base level of performance is higher than that of BDS right now. With that all said, let's look at G2. The team that received the infamous invite spot over the much more deserving Adventure Force. And now G2, where to begin? You look at the names and like Pangu, Shaz, Fabian, and you think that this should normally a year ago you would have said this is the team to win it all. But time goes on, and it's not a year ago. We're in the present, and G2 is not the dominant team. G2 is not the era-defining team that it once was. So we shouldn't approach them like that. This is a new team in the sense that they are no longer the dominant team. They are no longer the team to beat in this group. I mean, they probably are just based off name value. However, if you look at the current state of the squad, I don't think they're nearly as weak as people are saying they are. They aren't like bottom EU team or anything. But they're definitely not top EU. They're like a middle of a pack team now. Fabian's still a good IGL, Pengu's still a good support player, Kanto Racketti's still a good fragger, but things aren't clicking anymore. They're trying to they need to find a new style or find a new identity as a team because it's not the same core that set Vieira. If you look at the team that started the era, that was Pengu, Fabian, KS, Goga, and Falco and Eunice. It was a 6-man roster. And then Falco left, and then KS left, and they picked up Kanto Ricchetti, and then that team maintained the era. So I would say right around SI19 actually is when this team started falling off. However, most people wouldn't really acknowledge that it was a falling off and like the era had ended until the team failed to make it to Milan or the Season 9 Pro League Finals. And then it was cemented and, confirmed after they placed second in the Raleigh Major, just kind of rolling into the finals over two pretty weak teams of the grand scheme of things. And then they failed to make it to the Season 10 finals after a really bad Pro League season. Add in there that they had a really bad qualifier to make it into the this invitational, and they're not looking that hot. The pieces, at least when you look at name brand or face value of Fabian Pengu, who's a great player who can play flex, support, frag, he can do anything and play any role. And you look at Kanto Ricchetti, the premier fragger for the greater part of a year or so. You look at those three names and you go, hell yeah, I can see that working. But it's not right now. You add in Uno, and I think Uno's a great player, and I think he's finally had time to integrate into the squad. And then you look at Cryan, and I think Cryan, you look at the names that G2 probably tried to pick up, because I've heard that Cryan was like their 5th choice. You think of names that G2 probably would have turned to first, and the fact that they didn't get them says a lot. I think when you have teams that are seen as the best team in the world, it's G2, they had an era, then they lost for Raleigh Major. If you have players that don't want to join that team, even if they're on the downturn, if you have players that don't want to join G2, I think that says something about their state. And there's definitely potential for them to upset. They always do seem to perform better at lands, especially majors, like Raleigh. But at the end of the day, I can only see them really beating Reciprocity consistently. Even BDS, I think, can outperform them if Shaiko or Renshiro just decides to take over a game. Firepower, potentially, to win. But I think overall, even if they get out of this group, they won't make it out of quarters, and they definitely won't make it out of semis. So yeah, that's my predictions of how Group D will go. It'll probably be Reckon wildcard, making it through to the stage matches, quarterfinals, semifinals, all that good stuff. I think BDS and G2 might provide decent games. We know G2 has the strategic foundation to have some good matches and tear apart teams that aren't prepared. With all that said, let me know what you guys think and any of your thoughts on the rest of the groups. Expect more of this kind of content, more analytical stuff like this from the channel. So yeah, peace.